All righty, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Red, White, Claret, and Blue Show. I am your host, Alex Baquero, here for a solo preview of our match against Bournemouth. Chris may or may not be lost somewhere in the Mexican desert, forced to drink his own urine, probably eating coyote, which is so much worse, so I've heard, than the goat that he was already fearing. And so I am here as your lone American villain voice, as always, serving up an extra lukewarm serving of lukewarm opinions because I don't have Chris, my co-host, who tends to turn up the temperature a little bit. So we're gonna keep it right down the middle today. Please go follow, like, rate, review, subscribe, all the places down below my face. We appreciate everybody who's been slide tackling into the comments to come engage with us. We love you all, and we're really enjoying the debate. Thank you for bringing it to us. As I said, here to preview the Bournemouth match. No midweek European action. No midweek European action again for a little over a month. So yeah, we get back to some regular old EPL action with a little FA Cup dalliance in between. Chris and I will be back maybe Saturday, more likely probably Sunday with a Bournemouth recap, and then sometime next week as we preview our next match going forward. So probably hitting your feeds about twice a week for the foreseeable future, pending travel, baby, all that kind of stuff. So let's jump right into it. Bournemouth away Saturday, 10 a.m. Feels like forever since we've had a 10 a.m. Saturday game, and probably will continue to be that way. Last time we met, Villa rolled out 4-0 victors. Emi Buendia goal. Daniel Malin, rest in peace, goal. And you know, if you just looked at this one on the face of it, you would probably say dominant, comprehensive Villa victory. And listen, ball don't lie, right? You don't win 4-0 when you don't have some sort of a comprehensive victory. But as I was kind of looking back at that match and reanalyzing it, you know, it definitely felt like the scoreline flattered Villa to a certain degree. There were large portions of the match where Bournemouth was on top. Iraola was probably at the peak of being a little too stuck in his preferred high press, high intensity system. They left a ton of space in behind. They had recently been shredded that way, and Villa really got them the same. So, you know, Bournemouth were much higher up the table at that point. We'll get into a little bit where they've been since, but they really plummeted back down the table with a awful, atrocious run of fixtures. So, you know, the biggest thing that I'll be looking at is whether they have adjusted their style of play and whether that makes things a lot more difficult for Aston Villa in this one. I don't necessarily look at the 4-0 victory and say that that's something that we're going to easily replicate, particularly the way that Villa are playing right now. So, as I said, you know, right around that point was when the wheels fell off for Bournemouth. I think that was their second loss in a row, and they went on to not collect a win in 11 matches in a row. 6 losses, 5 draws. Didn't come close to sniffing victory in those. And you know, a lot of people were chalking that up to them needing to replace their entire back five, right, in the offseason. And at first it seemed like Iraola, great manager that he is, had figured out a way to make this new one work, but clearly there were some gaps there, and they weren't necessarily as trained as able to play his high line system. And you can see with where all those people went, you know, why that might be the case. Those were all world-class defenders that they had last year. So, you know, what does he do? If you look at it now, they're now technically unbeaten in 5. If you want to look at me and say that Newcastle beat them on penalties in the cup, sure, they did. You're right. But, you know, over the course of 90 minutes, 120 minutes, that game was level. So for the purposes of if we're going to project them over 90 minutes, they're unbeaten in 5. And even before that, you know, they played Arsenal well in their 3-2 loss. And then they've kind of gone on this run against not the best opposition, I suppose. Spurs, Liverpool, Wolves, draw to Newcastle, draw to Brighton. But hey, they're turning it around. And so the question is what has changed? What is Iraola trying to do that's a little bit different? And as I've said, known for his high octane system. Not quite a Jurgen Klopp gegenpress kind of thing, but close. Very high line, much like Aston Villa. They press very high up the pitch, try and create turnovers and try and attack quickly. Um, but people figured out how to exploit that. You know, the forward press wasn't quite as strong as in years past. They've certainly dealt with their share of injuries, and so I think it just became a little too easy to exploit. So in recent weeks, um, Iraola has talked about how he's kind of coaching the team on being much more rigid defensively, much more solid and compact, and maybe dropping a little bit deeper, and then not necessarily trying to be as intricate, creative, free flowing offensively, a little bit more direct, a little bit more with the through ball, a little bit more over the top. Um, he has been focusing on the set pieces, but this is not yet necessarily borne fruit yet. You look at their 3-2 victory over Liverpool, both goals that they conceded were on set pieces. And so they continue to be pretty frail there. So when you think about, you know, what Villa do well, what Villa do poorly, obviously you need to take advantage of the set pieces. This is another McPhee game where we could create an opportunity or two. But when you look at someone who potentially is willing to sit a little deeper and attack Villa's own high line a little bit more directly, we talked about how many times Brentford was inches away from breaking through, and that ultimately is how they got their goal. High turnover, play in behind, and score. You know, I am a little concerned that Villa's style now seems to be one for Bournemouth to exploit. What also has me concerned is Bournemouth's home road splits. So even with that 11 match losing run, Bournemouth, Bournemouth's record on the season is still 6-4-2 at home. They're atrocious away, 2-5-5. So you they concede a ton more possession away, 6% fewer. They concede a ton more shots when they're away from home. They concede 16 as opposed to 9. And you know what's weird is actually they also score more away. They've scored 2 more goals than they have at home. Might be because they're losing more, so they have more opportunities to kind of go forward. Um, but their overall XG created at home and on the road is pretty much the same. So what's the reason for that poor road record? The fact that their defense is so much worse. I think when teams are at home, when they understand their stadium, their grass, their fans, all that kind of stuff, they can kind of exploit maybe what Bournemouth are trying to do a little more. Unfortunately, Villa are not at home where Bournemouth is terrible. Villa are away. And so we are in a bit of a rut. We've lost 3 of 6, and we are heading down to a team that, if nothing else, knows how to protect their home ground, much like Aston Villa do. 2 losses, same as Villa. So, again, you know, you look at 4-0, you look at where Bournemouth is in the table, you look at where they have been for a large portion of the season, and I'm guessing that a lot of people are probably looking at this as an easy game, an easy run of fixtures. But you know, I said this a couple weeks ago when I was doing a solo pod previewing what February was going to look like, what the rest of Villa's season was going to look like with these injuries that we picked up. And I said, you know, we might not be catching Bournemouth at the right time. We might have wanted to catch them like 2 weeks prior. And I think that really shows in some of the data that I've seen kind of analyzing them. It seems like they're starting to turn a corner a little bit. It seems like Iraola has kind of figured it out. And by the way, they already were a great team at home. And so that continues to spell a little bit of trouble and difficulty for Aston Villa. I'm not necessarily at the point yet where I'm going to start going through the fixtures for Chelsea, Man U, and Liverpool. We've still got a cushion. We've still got time. But it does seem like we are anxiously kind of looking over our shoulder and hoping that Tammy Dougie and Leon Bailey get up to speed faster than those other teams can catch up to us. So, player news for Bournemouth. Antoine Semenyo obviously gone over to Man City. It's going to be interesting to see how they cope. Obviously, they're unbeaten in 3 without him. They invested in a Brazilian wonder kid, Ryan, who got €100 million release clause. Got an assist in his first 22 minutes, so you know maybe that'll bear fruit. Got another midfielder, Alex Toth, who might be a preemptive replacement for Alex Scott, and then a new goalkeeper who hasn't started yet. So this is something else that Villa need to pay attention to. We got to take advantage of Petrovic, and I do remember him having a pretty poor game the first time we play them. He has the worst goals prevented record of any starting Premier League goalkeeper. He's at almost -4 in that metric, and he's been particularly vulnerable from range. Villa like to shoot from far out, and no one has dropped more crosses than him. So, I keep shouting for us to utilize our width. We saw us putting in a lot of crosses against Brentford. If we do that, we really need to have the runners who get on him, make him a little nervy, make him drop it. And if he does, take advantage of that mistake. With Semenyo going and losing those 10 goals, Junior Krupi now their leading goal scorer at 8. Interestingly, he only starts about half their available matches, so probably more of a bench threat. And then they're dealing with a lot of injuries. Tyler Adams, Ben Glennon-Doak, Justin Kluivert. Tavernier has a muscle injury he's been dealing with, might be back, uncertain. David Brooks rolled his ankle in the last one, so he's probably waiting a late fitness test. So when we turn to Villa, what does Villa need to do to be successful here, and what kind of game are we potentially predicting? I'm very nervous about Bournemouth's press at home. Villa have shown over the past few weeks an inability to break teams down that are more resolute defensively. Everton, Brentford, clearly. So this is one where I think Villa are going to need to step on it a little bit early. They're really going to need to show that they can play through this press, get Bournemouth a little bit more concerned, get them kind of second guessing whether they really have turned this corner. And so this is one, unlike the past few where I've said that Villa might kind of test this one out, this might be one where we play a little bit more aggressive a little earlier on. If we're dilly-dallying with the ball, around our own 18, I expect Bournemouth to be able to press, cause some turnovers, and really cause us some issues. And the amount of self-inflicted mistakes that we've had this year, most recently Tyrone Mings in Europe, then the loss and the way that we defended Brentford when they ultimately scored after going down to 10 men. Like there's a lot of individual and team mistakes that are causing Villa pain here. And so while I think Bournemouth is often used as an example of a ground that's fairly friendly to go to, you still don't want to let the team get too excitable, pin their ears back and really get after you. So, like I said, faster start from Villa. I think an aggressive start from Villa. I think Unai Emery is going to want an early goal and to kind of show that we can play through, make them second guess how they're set up defensively a little bit. And so in terms of lineup, who is best positioned to do that? Emi Martinez is going to be in goal. Right back, Matty Cash, Ezri Konsa, Pau Torres. And I think Ian Maatson, I think his ability to run and play through the press, both off the dribble and off the pass is going to be useful here. In defensive midfield, so I think Amadou Onana will start holding with Douglas Luiz. Douglas Luiz looked like he didn't miss a beat last week, and Onana was held out precautionarily due to muscle fatigue from the European night. Obviously been in and out of fitness, but I think with a week off, he'll be back in there. In front of them, I think this kind of is starting to pick itself. Emi Buendia, Morgan Rogers, Tammy Abraham up top. The question continues to be, what do we do on the right wing? And Chris and I feel like a broken record saying this every week, but even after having sent him out on loan, it seems like when Unai Emery needs a reaction, he turns to Leon Bailey. When he needs some kind of leadership to coach people through it, he turns to Leon Bailey, especially in the absence of Mings and John McGinn. So Jadon Sancho still doesn't seem to be doing enough to convince Unai. Got hauled off at half last week or shortly thereafter. And frankly, he hasn't done enough to convince me either. So I would probably turn to Leon Bailey in this one, have him kind of know how to break this down and get something going for us. Interestingly, last week, Jadon Sancho for me looked so much better coming off the left wing. And so I wonder if at some point we'll see him maybe as an early sub for Emi Buendia if that's not really bearing fruit. And then up top, this is an interesting one. Is Ollie Watkins back from his injury? Tammy Abraham, I thought looked really good last week, so I would be fine to continue to roll with that one. But I do think that if he's healthy, Unai Emery will turn back to Ollie Watkins. So front four, I guess again, Emi Buendia, Morgan Rogers, Leon Bailey, and then Ollie Watkins up top. And I think we should be ready for early substitutions if it doesn't look like it's going our way. Unfortunately, a draw at this point in the season just isn't really getting it done for us, and I don't think that that's necessarily doing anything to help the team's morale. So, you could be looking at more halftime subs. You could be looking at subs around 55, 60 minutes, whether that's bringing on Tammy, whether that's bringing on Sancho, whether that's, I don't know, Bogard, etc. All these kind of guys, just to create a different look and get something else going. In terms of a prediction, I am a little pessimistic on things right now. I'm gonna say that this is gonna be a 1-1 draw away at Bournemouth. I don't have a great track record when I predict draws, but I'm gonna predict a 1-1 draw here. And that's kind of it. That's the prediction. And that's the game that we're looking for. It's going to be tough. It's going to be harder than we expect. And it is a huge one to kind of help Villa get back on track for the rest of this month, get some of the wins that we want to stack up before our schedule gets really difficult over the last few months of the season. I guess the only other thing to really talk about is with the end of the transfer window, Harvey Elliott is obviously staying at Aston Villa, and you've seen a lot of reporting over the past day from Jacob Tanswell and others about what kind of happened in this negotiation between Aston Villa and Liverpool. And I thought this was really interesting. It makes no sense to me. Villa wanted to terminate the loan but didn't want to pay. Liverpool basically said, nah, we sold him to you in the summer. I think the term they used was they banked on the sale, they planned for it, and they effectively considered him sold last summer, which kind of says, they might have felt like the agreement with Villa was that they were doing them a solid. Hey, we won't make you pay for him now because we know you're under PSR issues, but we'll put an absurdly low appearance fee in there so that you effectively are buying him, and we can count that against our own books. And that's just fascinating to me because basically Liverpool, I think, are calling Villa's bluff and saying, with your injury crisis, you've now just played him twice in a week. You are going to have to play him 3 more times to trigger that buy clause. And I do wonder what happens differently if John McGinn is healthy, if Boubacar Kamara is healthy, if Yuri Tielemans is still healthy, and so it's so clear that we have no need to play Harvey Elliott. I wonder if Liverpool come down in that they either up the appearance fee or lower the fee to buy him or make it an option or whatever that is. Now we're in an interesting point where we have an injury crisis, but the games are spacing out a little bit right now. And so we can afford to not necessarily play him on a week in, week out basis. I think we have enough other options, particularly as Allison gets up to speed and can potentially get integrated into some of those forward positions as well. And it might wind up being that he gets 2 more appearances and then gets sent down to the 23s for the rest of his time with Villa. And that really sucks to be in that position where, listen, is he a week in, week out Champions League player? I think we've probably seen enough to say probably not. But could he help someone middle, bottom half of the Premier League table? Absolutely. And as we keep saying every single week, been a consummate professional, hasn't expressed any issues with anything that's happened to him, just wants to work harder and learn and prove that he's worth it. I think the problem is Villa just have so many players in this spot, and to spend 35 million on another one, for a team as constricted as we are just doesn't really make sense. So no, I'm not at this point going to advocate that we just play him 3 times and trigger the clause. I don't necessarily think that makes good financial sense, no matter where we finish this year. Um, and so unfortunately, I think he lost a year, got some bad advice, stuck between 2 clubs that didn't really want him, and that's just really sad, but also really dumb from Liverpool's perspective because Villa have all the power to just not pay him, not trigger the clause, and now they're going searching for 35 million to offset the half a billion that they spent last summer. So that's really it. Really quick one, obviously being solo today, but just wanted to get in there and give a little preview of this weekend's action. Really hoping for a win. Really hoping that I'm wrong on my prediction. YouTube shout outs, new subscribers, Sam Leggett and Garbo456. Thank you guys for joining. Look forward to having you be part of the squad moving forward. And so yeah, Chris will be back this weekend, and you won't just hear me droning into this mic for 30 minutes, hopefully happily. So everybody, until then, stay safe, stay warm, and up the villa. Hi, Mom and Dad.